Imagine a simple farmer, his hands calloused from working the soil, his days dictated by the rising and setting of the sun. Now, imagine that same farmer transforming into the most feared Viking warrior in history, a legend whose name would echo through the ages. This is the incredible true story of Ragnar Lothbrok. Our story begins in Denmark, around the year 795 AD. The Viking age is dawning, but for a young man named Ragnar, life is about his farm and his family. He's not yet the sea king of sagas, just a man living a humble life. But history, like the tides, is unpredictable. Tragedy strikes when a local jarl murders Ragnar's first wife. This single act of violence ignites a fire within him, a thirst for vengeance that will forever alter his path. The farmer is gone, and in his place, a warrior is born. His first legendary feat wasn't on a battlefield, but against a mythical beast. A local ruler, Jarl Harald, offered his daughter Thora's hand in marriage to any man who could slay a giant serpent plaguing his lands. Ragnar, ever resourceful, coated his trousers in tar and sand, creating a protective layer against the serpent's venom. He faced the beast, and he won. This victory not only won him a bride, but also his famous nickname, Lothbrok, or Hairy Breeches. It was a name that would soon be whispered in fear across the seas. From this local triumph, Ragnar's ambition grew. He was no longer content with just farming or avenging personal wrongs. He saw a world ripe for the taking. Gathering a crew of loyal warriors, he began to look beyond the shores of Scandinavia. The Viking longship became his new home, the open sea his new domain. He evolved from a local hero into a master strategist and a relentless raider. The year is 845 AD. The city of Paris, the heart of the powerful Frankish kingdom, feels impenetrable. But Ragnar sees opportunity where others see an impassable fortress. He leads a massive fleet of over 100 longships up the River Seine. The Parisians are terrified. They've heard tales of the Northmen, but they've never faced a force like this. Ragnar's attack is brutal and effective. The city is sacked, its defenses breached. The Frankish king, Charles the Bald, is forced to pay a staggering ransom, 7,000 pounds of silver and gold to make the Vikings leave. This wasn't just a raid, it was a statement. Ragnar Lothbrok had announced his arrival on the world stage, proving that no city, no matter how powerful, was safe from his wrath. His fame and fortune grew with every raid. He sailed to Ireland, battled his way across England, and even ventured into the warm waters of the Mediterranean. Gold, silver, and treasures from across the known world filled his coffers, making him one of the wealthiest men of his time. But Ragnar's legacy wasn't just built on plunder, it was also built on family. He had several sons, each destined to carve their own name into history. There was Bjorn Ironside, a legendary explorer. Ivar the Boneless, a brilliant and ruthless strategist. Halfdan Ragnarsson and Sigurd Snake in the Eye. Ragnar raised them to be warriors, instilling in them his own ambition and cunning. He knew his story wouldn't end with him, it would live on through them. The historical evidence for Ragnar himself is a fascinating puzzle. While he is a central figure in the Norse sagas, contemporary accounts from places like England and France are more fragmented. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, for instance, mentions Viking leaders and raids that align with the stories about Ragnar, but often doesn't name him directly. It refers to a Ragnar or a Viking leader who could very well be the man himself. Archaeologists have found evidence of the Great Viking raid on Paris and mass graves in England from the period, which all support the general narrative of the sagas. It's a classic case where legend and history intertwine. The man may have been real, but the legend became larger than life, a symbol of the ultimate Viking spirit. But as with all great sagas, the rise is followed by the fall. In 865 AD, an older, perhaps overconfident Ragnar launched his final, fateful raid. With only 2 ships, a shockingly small force, he sailed to the kingdom of Northumbria in England. It was a fatal miscalculation. His small fleet was no match for the forces of King Ælla. Ragnar was captured. The legendary Viking king, the terror of Europe, was now a prisoner. King Ælla, eager to make an example of the man who had tormented his lands for years, chose a particularly gruesome end for Ragnar. He was thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. According to the sagas, as the snakes bit into him, Ragnar did not scream or beg for mercy. Instead, he is said to have calmly recited his death song, proclaiming his defiance and predicting his son's vengeance. His famous last words, how the little pigs would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers, were a direct challenge to King Ælla, a promise that his death would not be the end, but a new, more terrible beginning. And the little pigs did grunt. When news of Ragnar's horrific execution reached his sons, their grief turned into a unified rage. They put aside their own rivalries and personal ambitions to answer their father's call for revenge. They assembled the largest Viking force ever seen, an invasion army so vast that the English annals would call it the Great Heathen Army. In 866, this mighty army landed in England, not to raid, but to conquer. Led by Ivar the Boneless and his brothers, they swept across the land, overwhelming the divided Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Their primary target was Northumbria and its king. They captured the city of York and, eventually, King Ælla himself. The revenge Ragnar's sons exacted was the stuff of nightmares. They subjected King Ælla to the blood eagle, one of the most brutal execution methods described in Norse poetry. It involved carving the victim's back, breaking their ribs to resemble wings, and pulling their lungs out. While historians debate whether the blood eagle was a real practice or a literary invention, its inclusion in the saga highlights the sheer ferocity of the sons' vengeance. They didn't just kill Ælla, they annihilated him, a symbolic sacrifice for their father. The Great Heathen Army didn't stop there. They went on to conquer much of England, establishing what would be known as the Danelaw. For centuries, a huge part of England was ruled by Vikings, its laws, language, and culture forever changed by these Northmen. It all started with one man, a farmer seeking vengeance, who became a king whose death unleashed an army that reshaped a nation. The legend of Ragnar Lothbrok shows us how the actions of a single individual, driven by love, loss, and ambition, can set in motion events that ripple through history for centuries. He was more than a raider, he was a catalyst for change, a folk hero, and a name that will forever be synonymous with the fierce, untamable spirit of the Vikings. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the Viking Age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more epic stories from history. See you next time.